Hello, everybody. It's Dan Basse and Ben Buckner here on Tuesday, the 29th of July. We've got grain markets that are slightly lower, with the exception being wheat. Chicago wheat being down 7 cents here in the modified session. We'll see how we open up here at 8:30, but overall tones are generally weaker. Everybody's waiting for the news coming out of Stockholm, that U.S.-Chinese meeting that is being held. Will, of course, tariff levels be extended for 90 days? Will other discussions be held? Will there be any small purchase announcements? That's what, of course, the grain markets are waiting for. We don't have any further details. It's been very quiet in terms of that Chinese U.S. meeting, and we'll see how it all pans out. But there is a 7-hour time difference between Stockholm and Chicago, so I would imagine we'll have something by the close here in Chicago, at least today. Ben, what do you got in terms of the markets? And give us an update of what you think.
Yeah, kind of more of the same, I think, fundamentally. And we are waiting on U.S.-China negotiations. It's a big deal. We're kind of concerned that really nothing happens. And then looking at something like the value of the yuan, it's pretty weak, especially compared to 2020, the last time they were a pretty big buyer. So does that play into this at all? But otherwise, it's kind of assessing, how big is big. We've got everything from the August crop report, crop tours, FSA acreage still to come at us. So we're not quite out of the woods yet. We did hear of some wind and some hail reports overnight, kind of the upper northwest corn belt. We will not know anything about damage for some time, and what we're hearing so far is that maybe it's kind of minimal when we think about regional production and certainly national production. But I did want to highlight that there were some pretty heavy storms, straight line winds that went through this area overnight. But still, water is not an issue. And I guess we can think about the risk of someplace like Iowa being too wet relative to ideal conditions, but even there, I think some areas can absorb a lot of this rain. But you do see we've got more water coming to the Central Plains, Central Midwest. Soil moisture anomalies on the right. There are really no areas of concern today. Even 2 or 3 weeks ago, you did have that sort of a bullseye on northern Illinois and northern Indiana. That has disappeared given the pattern over the last couple of weeks. So again, as we get into the details of crop production, water is not going to be the issue. Availability is pretty abundant. But I think, too, when we think about price discovery, and again, something we have highlighted is the risk between now and the middle or latter part of harvest, no matter what anyone's yield forecast is. And I think now we've also got to contend with not just highly rated crops, but also the beginning of harvest. So the crop progress report's kind of hidden in the details. Louisiana is now 10% harvested on corn. So that might be anywhere from 12 to 15 million bushels. Is in a bin somewhere, the new crop as of this morning. So whether it's on farm, off farm, we are starting to replenish the cash pipeline in the southern U.S. Arkansas's crop 19% mature. Mississippi's 22% mature. So it's kind of just a matter of weeks before we really get the harvest going in the south. Usually Louisiana is about half done harvesting corn by August 18th or August 20th. So that is right down the road. And then, of course, this is going to be all over the media landscape. We're looking at very highly rated crops still. We did lose some value in terms of good, excellent, mostly in Colorado and Texas. National ratings were down 1 point at 73% good to excellent. That is still at the upper end of the historical range when we look at the last 3 or 4 decades. And so kind of providing the framework, again, we'll get into the nuance of crop tours, et cetera, but we're kind of continuing to eliminate years to compare to. So if we look at years that going back to 1990, that the crop was rated at least 73% good to excellent. As of the very end of July, you've only got 6 years. And in each of those years, you had a yield above trend anywhere from 3% to 15%. So do you want to take this week by week, crop tour by crop tour? But I do think the probable yield as of now, and I think the market is digesting this, something like 185 to 187 bushels an acre. That adds up to 500 million bushels of corn supplies relative to USDA's forecast. And again, thinking just about cash markets and how they perform, the 95 million acres planted, you could have a pretty wide range of yield scenarios, and you still get a lot of cash physical supply in the next 45 to 60 days. And soybeans counter-seasonally crop ratings jumped. And so this is looking to be a pretty special U.S. soybean crop if we can avoid major weather issues for another 3 or 4 weeks. 70% good to excellent, the soybean crop on Sunday. up from 68% a week ago, and compares to about 62% on average. So again, this is a very, very healthy crop. Doing the same thing, let's just take a look at years that in late July the crop was rated at least 70% good to excellent. You got final yields anywhere from 1 to 18% above trend. If we assume 1 to 4% above trend, I think it's pretty reasonable. You are at a national yield of about 53 to 54.8 bushels an acre, and that adds about 50 to 200 million bushels to the U.S. balance sheet, ceteris paribus. So are we getting to a scenario where the probable stocks estimates come September, October are getting closer to 500 million bushels for U.S. soybean in stocks? I don't think we're going to do much with demand, if maybe lower it, because we've seen not very much Chinese interest. But it does seem like that's the general thesis of the markets, or the ideas for in stocks, even from USDA, are getting higher. They're not getting lower. And the one market that's been, I think, disappointing this week, but fundamentally seems to be accomplishing something, is the wheat market. And the wheat market has shed a lot of premium so far, but it is finding demand. So I think at the lower end of the recent range, we want to be careful being bearish. For the first time in several years, the U.S. cash wheat market does compete with German and Russian origin, at least on a FOB basis. I think we're $9 a ton Gulf hard red below Russian, about 15 below comparable German. And so you've seen the market respond. And we're not doing anything into North Africa, the Middle East, but it does look like traditional buyers, at least, are stepping up to the market. Hard red exports, now are significantly 70% above last year. So the USDA's forecast, the graphic on the right kind of portrays this best, maybe too low. So I think the market's got to clear a lot of supplies, but it does seem to be doing that in the export market. And so that's why we're looking at the wheat market this week and kind of scratching our heads. What is happening? General grain market, adequate oversupply, I still think is the dominant theme for now. So, weather's become a little tedious, but it does look to be generally non-threatening. And so we're kind of, how big is big? What do we have to do to decrease stocks to China help us out? That's all we're focusing on the next couple of weeks.
Good rundown, Ben, and I really appreciated that yield digestion in terms of conditions relative to where final yields ended up. In Russia, the lineup to buy wheat is still really low. So, there's the vessels just aren't showing up. We're going to have another slow export pace out of Russia. I think that's what the wheat market's really looking at, even amid their bug problems and all the issues there. Any final closing comments?
I don't think so. Again, it's not much new happening. We will follow what's happening in Europe very, very closely, but I don't think a change in global grain flows is imminent, at least this week.
Let's see how it all pans out. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a great trading day. We'll focus on that U.S.-China trade meeting that'll conclude in Stockholm. That'll be the key for, of course, the remainder of the grain session. Be well, everybody.